Today we'll be starting with the chapter life processes. So let's have a look at what all topics we have to cover in this chapter. The important topics basically, as I've already mentioned before also, all the topics are important, right? We have to cover each and everything that is given in the syllabus, and we do not have to leave or skip anything. There are some parts, or there are some statements that are given in a very small box which can be placed at a specific corner of the page, which may not be as exuberant as the original text, but we do not have to skip everything. Each and every detail which is given in the book is important and should be we should be well versed with everything. So let's have a look at the important topics that are present in this chapter. So nutrition, how different organisms, be it lower organisms that have lesser body complexity, how do they derive their nutrition? What is the mode of nutrition, whether it is an autotrophic nutrition or a heterotrophic nutrition or a parasitic nutrition or a saprophytic nutrition or a holozoic nutrition, right? We should be well aware of all the different types of modes of basically nutrition, as well as which organism is associated with which mode of nutrition, right? Which organism follows which mode of nutrition. We should be well aware of that. After that, respiration. So the diagram of the respiratory system is important. The labelings on the diagram should be given special attention. And apart from that, different types of respiration that we'll be dealing with. Aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. What would be the end result if, let's say, the respiration that were to take place is an aerobic respiration? What would be the end result if the respiration that were to take place is an anaerobic respiration? The results in both the cases would vary. What would be the variation? In what circumstances would an aerobic respiration give rise to this as a product, or under what circumstances would it give rise to this as a product? So we should be well aware of that. After that, digestion, a complete diagram of the alimentary canal, very, very important. And where does digestion take place? Stepwise, we have to understand from where does digestion start, then what are the different enzymes that are involved in digestion, how do they aid in the process of digestion, how do different parts of the alimentary canal, what role do they play, what individual role do they play in this process of digestion. So everything should be, we should be well aware of that. After that, transportation in case of animals, as well as transportation in case of plants, right? In case of animals, whether it is a single circuit transportation, it is a double circuit transportation. Well labeled diagram of the heart, very, very important diagram of the heart, right? Different parts of the heart, and what all are the respiratory structure in other organisms. How many like what are the number of chambers that are present in the heart, let's say of a reptile, or let's say of a mammal. So all these small tidbits one should put very, very concrete attention on such minor details. And apart from that, transportation that takes place in plants. So we know that the transportation that takes place in animals varies to a very, very great extent as compared to the transportation that takes place in plants. It's a completely altogether a very, very different process. So well aware of xylem and its elements, well aware of phloem and its elements, and basically just a gist about how this transportation or translocation takes place in case of plants, right? So two very, very completely different approaches, transportation in animals and plants. And finally, excretion. Very important to remember the diagram of the excretory system as well as the diagram of nephron. Okay, the individual diagram of nephron and its parts, and the entire process, what type of organism produces which type of excretory waste, which type of nitrogenous waste, right? Which is the most toxic type of nitrogenous waste, which is the least toxic type of nitrogenous waste, which nitrogenous waste requires maximum amount of water for its elimination, which nitrogenous waste requires minimum water for its elimination. So all these things we have to be well aware of, right? So the approach will be similar as to what we followed in the previous class. So we will be starting with multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions are objective questions in which a question would be given and four possible options or answers to that question is given, and we have to select the correct one. So this is a very straightforward question. Blood from superior vena cava flows into, right? So if we are well aware of the structure and the function, we know that blood from the superior vena cava. So first thing that should strike our mind is what type of blood is the superior vena cava bringing in. So the superior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the upper parts of the body and it pushes it into the right atrium, right? So the superior vena cava, it brings deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body and it transports it into the right atrium, right? So the correct answer to this question will be blood from superior vena cava flows into the right atrium, right? So the correct option will be A, right atrium. Moving on to the next question, which of the following help in protecting the inner lining of the stomach from the harmful effect of hydrochloric acid? So we know that hydrochloric acid is extremely important because not only does it provide a very sterile environment in the sense of the fact that it helps in killing microorganisms or germs that may have entered the alimentary canal due to or while the process of eating or ingestion of food. There are chances that some microorganisms or germs might enter the body. So the first role that hydrochloric acid plays is sort of acting against those microorganisms or killing those microorganisms or germs that might have entered into the body with food. Second most important role that the hydrochloric acid is associated with is the fact that it helps in the activation of certain enzymes. Certain enzymes are present in their inactive form and they require an acidic medium to become active and perform their respective functions. So these are two of the main properties or functions of hydrochloric acid. But at the end of the day, it is an acid. It will be it will have some harmful effects in the walls of the alimentary canal. So in the lining of the stomach, it is going to lay some harmful effects if the wall of the stomach is not protected properly. So which of the following helps in protecting the inner lining of the stomach? The answer to this is mucus. Mucus, it basically forms a barrier, or it basically prevents the direct attack of hydrochloric acid on the inner lining of the stomach, hence protecting the inner lining of the stomach from getting, we can say, corroded by the effect of this acid. So the correct answer to this question will be mucus helps in protecting the inner lining of the stomach from the harmful effect of hydrochloric acid. Right? If we move on to the next question, the next question says, which among the following is necessary to carry out blood coagulation in a cut or wound? So this is a very straightforward and a very easy question. We know that platelets are the elements that are responsible for the clotting or coagulation of blood. If any harm were to be caused to the platelets, or if platelets were not present in the body, in that situation, what would happen? Even a small cut would have made it possible for the person to bleed to death. Even a small injury or a small cut would prove to be fatal for the individual, because platelets help in stopping that flow of blood that takes place in in a situation if a wound or an injury has taken place. So platelets are the elements that are required for the clotting of blood or coagulation of blood. So the correct answer, which among the following is necessary to carry out the blood coagulation in a cut or a wound? The correct answer to this will be platelets. Moving on to the next question. Normal blood pressure, systolic by diastolic, is. So we know that blood pressure is given in the form of systolic pressure upon diastolic pressure, and the blood pressure that should be present in a normal healthy individual, or the normal range of the blood pressure which is accepted, is 120 by 80 mm of Hg, right? So that should be the correct answer. So that is option A, right? 120 by 80 mm of Hg is the normal blood pressure, systolic by diastolic. Okay, so this was all for the MCQ type questions. Similar questions can be expected. Next, we move on to short answer type questions. So each short answer type question that we are going to deal with right now carries 2 marks. So let's have a look at the first question. The first question is comprising of 2 subparts. So basically, it means that we can treat each part as a 1 marker. So the first part says, what is peristaltic movement? So we know that peristalsis or peristaltic movement are movements or contractions that basically help in the movement of food, that basically push the food downwards towards the alimentary canal, so that, from the esophagus, it can be pushed down into the stomach, where the process of further digestion can take place. So we can answer this question in a way that peristaltic movement is a series of wave-like muscle contractions that move partially digested food downward through the alimentary canal, right? So they basically help in the steady flow or smooth movement, so that the food does not get stuck at any specific part of the canal. It has a smooth route, it has smooth movement. So basically, these are wave-like contractions that help in the movement of partially digested food through the alimentary canal, right? The next question says, stomata remain closed in desert plants during daytime. How do they perform photosynthesis? So first thing that we need to understand, that why does stomata remain closed in desert plants during daytime? This is an adaptation that the desert plants follow to avoid transpiration. So this is a technique, or we can say an adaptation in desert plants, because as it is, they are in an environment where water is scarce. And if they were to lose water by transpiration, then it would become very difficult for them. They could even die of dehydration. So why do basically desert plants have a scotoactive type of a stomata, or a stomata that remains closed during daytime? The reason to this is to prevent the water loss due to transpiration, because as it is, water is scarce. The question that arises now, and the question that is being asked, is then how do they perform photosynthesis? The answer to this is that stomata, indeed, it remains closed during daytime, but it opens during night, right? So the stomata opens during night, and in that process, these plants, they take in carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide in their cells is stored until the sun comes out, and then they carry on with the photosynthesis during daytime. So this is how we attempt this question. In desert plants, stomata opens at night and take in carbon dioxide. Stomata remains closed during daytime to prevent the loss of water by transpiration. They store carbon dioxide in their cells until sun comes out so that they can carry on with the photosynthesis during daytime. Right? So very straightforward and crisp answers that we had to give. Next 2-marker question, again, it has been broken down into 2 parts. So first part of the question is define excretion. And the second part of the question is name the basic filtration unit which is present in the kidney. So let's answer the first part. So basically the biological process which involves the removal of nitrogenous waste. It can be, the nitrogenous waste differs from organism to organism. So the nitrogenous waste can be either ammonia or urea or uric acid, whatever, depends on whether the organism is an aquatic organism or a terrestrial organism. The nitrogenous waste can vary. So basically the removal of these nitrogenous waste that are generated or that are produced in the body during various metabolic processes that take place, or metabolic activities that take place in the body, that phenomena is known as excretion. So let's have a look at the answer. The biological process involved in the removal of nitrogenous waste like ammonia, urea, uric acid, etc., along with excess of water, salts, and pigments produced during various metabolic activities in the body from the body of an organism is known as excretion, right? So here we have mentioned that it is the process of removal of nitrogenous waste. The nitrogenous waste can be ammonia, urea, or uric acid, depending on the habitat of the organism that is involved. And along with that nitrogenous waste, there is some amount of excess water, salts, drugs, or certain pigments also that are excreted out of the body. And these waste materials, or these nitrogenous wastes, are basically a result, or they are byproducts of the ongoing metabolic activities that take place in the body. Next part of the question asks that name the basic filtration unit which is present in the kidney. So it's a very, very evident and straightforward question. The basic filtration unit which is present in the kidney is nephron. Nephron is the structural and functional unit of the kidney. And if you were to further answer this question, you can also mention the different parts of the nephron. So you can also write that, that is optional. If you want to, you can, otherwise it's fine, because the question is just asking us to name the filtration unit which is present. It is not asking us to elaborate upon it or mention its parts. But as an add-on, if you have extra time remaining in your hands, you can write the parts. Further, you can, expand the answer and write down that a nephron consists of this parts. It consists of the Bowman's capsule, the tubules, the loop of Henle, the collecting duct. So you can just add one more line if you wish to. Otherwise, it's not asked in the question. It's not that necessary. Let's move on to the next 2-marker. So again, it consists of 2 subparts. So the first part says you have to give reasons for the following. First part is lungs always contain residual volume. So why do lungs always contain residual volume? You have to give a reason for this. So basically, no matter how much forcefully we exhale, there is some amount of air which always resides inside the lungs. The lungs are never completely empty or never completely devoid of air. There is some amount of air that is always present in the lungs, and that volume of air is known as the residual volume. So first, it is important for us to understand what residual volume is. So there is some amount of air that always remains inside the lungs, no matter how forcefully we exhale, and that volume of air is known as the residual volume. Why is residual volume required, or what are the advantages of residual volume? The first thing is that it provides a time period for oxygen to be absorbed and carbon dioxide to be released. First reason is that. And secondly, obviously, it prevents the lungs from collapsing. So that is the role that residual volume plays, or that is the reason why lungs always contain residual volume. So let's have a look at the answer. Lungs always contain residual volume so that during the breathing cycle, when air is inhaled and exhaled, there must be sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed and for carbon dioxide to be released. It is also important as it prevents the lungs from collapsing, right? So this right here are the two reasons why lungs always contain residual volume. The second part of the question is, give reason for the following that nostrils are lined with mucus. So basically, mucus helps in trapping any foreign particle, any dust particle that were to enter with the air that we are inhaling. So they basically help in trapping of those, foreign particles, so that they do not enter into our respiratory tract along with the air that we inhale. So mucus and hair present in nostrils help in filtration of inhaled air. It traps harmful substances and germs present in air. So that is the reason nostrils are lined with mucus as well as hair. Let's move to the next set of questions. These questions are 3-marker questions. So we'll be required to answer these questions in a little more detailed as compared to the answers that we gave in a 2-marker question. So this question is divided into 2 parts. First part, draw a flowchart to show the breakdown of glucose by various pathways. And second part, what is ATP? So the first process that is common for both aerobic and anaerobic respiration is the breakdown of glucose into a pyruvic acid or pyruvate. So glucose is a 6-carbon compound. In the cytoplasm, it breaks down into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid or 2 molecules of pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon compound, by a process known as glycolysis. Right, so this is a common pathway for both aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, this pyruvate, which is formed as a result of the breakdown of glucose, it can possibly enter 3 possible pathways depending on whether oxygen is present or it is not present. So the first pathway that takes place in yeast, this pyruvate in the absence of oxygen. Right, so the pathway we are talking about here, or the conditions that we are talking about here, are anaerobic conditions. So in yeast, in absence of oxygen, pyruvate forms a 2-carbon compound, which is ethanol, and along with that, carbon dioxide gas is released and energy is obtained. So this is the first outcome that can be seen. The second thing, in muscle cells, again in anaerobic condition, pyruvate can be converted into a 3-carbon compound, which is lactic acid, and along with energy being liberated. This process is again anaerobic respiration because it is taking place in the absence of oxygen. And lastly, the third possible outcome to the situation is that pyruvate can, in the presence of oxygen, it can split to carbon dioxide, water, and energy can be liberated in the process. And this is known as the aerobic respiration. So these are the three possible outcomes that can take place if pyruvate was to break down into further compounds. So you can, very well draw this flow chart and explain the process using this flow chart. Next part of the question asks for the definition, or what does ATP stand for. So firstly, we will give the full form of ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and ATP acts as the energy currency for most of the cellular processes, energy that is required to drive various biological processes in the body. They require the expenditure of ATP, they require the breakdown of ATP. So the energy released during the process of respiration is used to make an ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. So when adenosine diphosphate is combined, or when inorganic phosphate is added to adenosine diphosphate, then it results into the formation of ATP, right? So the energy which is released during the process of respiration is used to add this inorganic phosphate to ADP and convert it into ATP. Further, ATP can be broken down to release a fixed amount of energy, which can be used to drive several reactions that take place in the cell, right? So this is the complete process. We have given the full form, we have given the definition, we have explained how ATP functions, how it is formed. So we have pretty much given all the information that is associated with this question. Next question is again broken into two parts. So first part says, explain the nutrition process in amoeba. And the second part says, mention any two components of blood. So if you have time, you can even draw a diagram in this question, if time permits, right? It is not mentioned in the question. If they would have wanted a diagram, they would have properly asked for it, saying that explain or diagrammatically the nutrition process that takes place in amoeba. But it's not, the question is not framed in that manner. But again, as I've already mentioned, there's no harm in drawing a diagram if you have time in your hands, and if you feel like you can explain an answer better by using a diagram, you can might as well draw it. So the first part of the question says that explain the nutrition process in amoeba. So amoeba takes in food particles with the help of its finger-like projections called pseudopodia, right? Inside its cell, a food vacuole is formed around the food particle. So the food particle is surrounded by the food vacuole. Inside this food vacuole, complex substances are broken down into simpler ones, which are then diffused and distributed into the cytoplasm. The remaining waste, or the remaining undigested material, is sent to the surface of the cell and thrown out. This process of nutrition in amoeba is called endocytosis, right? So probably with the help of an entire diagram, you can complement this answer if you have time remaining in your hands. The next part of the question is, mention any two components of blood. So here plasma and blood corpuscles are given. You can write plasma, RBC, WBC, whatever, like there is no fixed right answer to this. Given a broader range, we have mentioned it as plasma and the blood corpuscles. All right. Next question, again, it is broken down into two parts. So we can say that each part carries around 1.5 5 marks each. Let's have a look at the question. The first question says, what is autotrophic? Well, the first part of the question says, what is autotrophic mode of nutrition? The second part says, list the various events that take place during photosynthesis. So we know that autotrophic nutrition is that type of nutrition in which an organism is capable of synthesizing their own food, and they do not depend on any other organism for food. Rather, other organisms depend on these autotrophs for food, right? So basically, they are the producers of the ecosystem. They produce food, and they are basically not dependent on any other organism for food. Rather, other organisms are dependent on them for food. So that's what we have written in the answer. Autotrophic nutrition is the type of nutrition where organisms synthesize their own food. They are called producers in the ecosystem. They use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to synthesize food. Example, plants, right? Next, list the various events that take place during photosynthesis. So, divided the events into 3 parts, and point wise we can write the answer. The following events take place during photosynthesis. First, absorption of light energy by chlorophyll. Second, conversion of light energy to chemical energy, and splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen, and this is the oxygen which is liberated. And lastly, reduction of carbon dioxide into carbohydrates, right? So these are the 3 main important events that take place in photosynthesis. First is the absorption of light energy by chlorophyll, which is the green pigment that are present in the chloroplast in the green plants. Then conversion of light energy to chemical energy, and splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen, in which oxygen is liberated as a byproduct, and reduction of carbon dioxide into carbohydrates, right? So these are the 3 mark questions. Next, we have 5 mark questions. Let's have a look at the questions. So the first question is divided into 5 parts, and very briefly we have to answer each part. So the first part says, what do the following transport? So we have 5 options here, and individually we have to answer what do these following parts transport. So we have xylem, phloem, pulmonary vein, vena cava, and pulmonary artery. So xylem, we know, is a vascular tissue which is which is concerned with the transportation of water and minerals in plants. So water and minerals are absorbed by the roots of the plant, and from there, with the help of this vascular tissue, they are conducted to, or they are transported to, all the parts of the plant. So xylem is a specialized plant conducting tissue that transports water and minerals from roots to all the parts of the plant. Next, phloem. Phloem, we know, is another vascular bundle which is responsible for the transport of food, which is prepared in the leaves via photosynthesis, and from the leaves it is responsible for taking that food or transporting that food to all the different parts of the plant. So basically, phloem is responsible for the transportation of food. Along with transporting food, phloem is also responsible for transport of certain hormones, certain plant growth regulators, amino acids. So all these things are also transported by phloem. So phloem transports food that is prepared in the leaves through photosynthesis to various parts of the plant. Along with products of photosynthesis, Phloem also transports amino acids, hormones, etc. in a plant. Next, pulmonary vein. So the pulmonary vein, which is present in the human circulatory system, it involves or it is involved with the bringing of oxygenated blood from the lungs and transporting it into the left atrium of the heart. So pulmonary vein brings oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium of the heart. Next part is vena cava. Vena cava, so superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Superior vena cava will bring deoxygenated blood from the upper parts of the body. Inferior vena cava is going to bring deoxygenated blood from the lower parts of the body. And both these vena cavas, they put this deoxygenated blood in the right atrium of the heart. So vena cava will bring in the deoxygenated blood and transport it in the right atrium of the heart. Lastly, pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery basically takes the deoxygenated blood from the right part of the heart to lungs so that oxygenation can take place, so that the blood can be oxygenated. So basically, pulmonary artery is responsible for the transportation of deoxygenated blood from the right part of the heart to lungs for oxygenation. Okay, so if we look at the next question, so diagram-based questions, not only, so this is just an example, but diagram of the circulatory system, diagram of heart as it is given, diagram of the digestive system, diagram of the excretory system, structure of nephron, diagram of the respiratory tract, diagram of, let's say, how an alveoli or how the structure and function of an alveolus works. All those things can be very well asked in a 5-marker question. A 5-marker question can very easily be a diagram-based question along with some other theoretical question associated with it. So the first part of the question says, draw a well-labeled diagram of human heart. So you have to mention all the parts very, very carefully. We have to mention the superior vena cava. So this is vena cava from the upper body. Then inferior vena cava. Then there is a right atrium, the right ventricle, right? And then there is a septum or a separation, which is separating the right part of the heart from the left part of the heart. And then we have pulmonary veins bringing oxygenated blood. We have the left atrium, the left ventricle, and aorta, as well as the pulmonary arteries and the branching. So we have to at least mention all these parts. If not anything else, we have to mention or we have to label all these parts, right? Next question is, describe blood circulation in humans. So a complete passage or a complete path is given. Deoxygenated blood from the body tissues is poured into the right atrium. So deoxygenated blood, from where it is coming? From the tissues of the body, which have used up oxygen to perform various functions. So from the tissues of the body, this deoxygenated blood is coming and it is being poured into the right atrium. When the heart contracts, the contraction of the heart forces this blood from the right atrium to the right ventricle, right? From the right ventricle, this oxygenated blood is taken to lungs for oxygenation via the pulmonary artery. Okay. Similarly, oxygenated blood from the lungs. So lungs give us oxygenated blood oxygenated blood from the lungs is taken to the left atrium, and then via contraction, this blood goes to the left ventricle, and then this is circulated to all the parts of the body. Right? So for making one complete round or circulation around all parts of the body, the blood passes through the heart twice. This is known as double circulation of blood, right? So this was an example of double circulation. You should also be aware of what single circulation is or single circuit circulation is. Apart from that, you should also be aware of chambers of heart, which organism has how many chambers of heart, and how does blood pass through those chambers, or what kind of circuit does it follow along the, whether it is a single circuit circulation or a double circuit circulation, right? Next, we move on to assertion and reason questions. So two statements would be given to us. One would be assertion, the other one would be reason. And we have to basically read both the statements carefully and then come to the conclusion as to which statement correctly fits our answer. So the first option stands for both assertion and reason are true, and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. The second option stands for both assertion and reason are true, but reason is not the correct explanation of assertion. C stands for assertion is true, but reason is false. And D stands for assertion is false and reason is true. So let's have a look at the statements. The first statement says, the purpose of making urine is to filter out undigested food from the intestine. This is the assertion. The reason is kidneys filter the waste and produce urine, right? So the first statement is wrong. The purpose of making urine is to filter out nitrogenous wastes from blood and not undigested food from the intestine. So this is an incorrect statement. The purpose of making urine is to filter nitrogenous waste from blood. Right? So this statement is incorrect. Kidneys filter the waste and produce urine. This statement is correct. So the assertion is false, but reason is true. So we will have to go with option D, that assertion is false, but reason is true. Let's have a look at another question. Assertion says the inner lining of the small intestine has numerous finger-like projections called villi. Yes, this statement is absolutely true. The next part or reason says villi increase the surface area for absorption. This statement is also true. And apart from being true, it is the correct explanation for the assertion. It very well explains the assertion. So the option that we are going to choose here is both assertion and reason are true, and reason is the correct explanation for assertion. So we are going to go with option A on this one. Next, assertion says human heart is four-chambered. This is true. Reason says vena cava is the only artery that supplies deoxygenated blood to the heart. Vena cava is not an artery, but it is a vein. So this particular statement is incorrect. So assertion is true, but reason is false. So we have to go with option C, that assertion is true, but reason is false. Last set of statements. Assertion says herbivores have a longer small intestine as compared to carnivores. Reason says cellulose is more difficult to digest than meat. Both these statements are correct. Herbivores have indeed have a longer a small intestine as compared to carnivores. And the reason to this is because herbivores have a cellulose based diet. They eat plants which contain high amounts of cellulose, and carnivores have a meat based diet. Cellulose is more difficult to digest than meat, and it takes a longer time to be digested as compared to meat. So that is why herbivores, because they have a cellulose based diet, and cellulose is more difficult to digest and it takes a longer time to digest, therefore herbivores have a longer small intestine as compared to carnivores. And the reason to this is that cellulose is more difficult to digest than meat. So assertion and reason both are correct, and reason is the correct explanation for the assertion. So we have to choose option A here. Okay, next we move on to the passage based question. So let's have a quick read at the passage once, and then we will move forward. So the plant transport system will move energy stored from leaves and raw materials from roots. These two pathways are constructed as independently organized conducting tubes. One, the xylem moves water and minerals obtained from the soil. The other, phloem transports products of photosynthesis from the leaves where they are synthesized to other parts of the plant. What are the different parts of xylem? So again, we will read the passage. There's no harm in reading the passage twice. So plant transport systems which will move energy stored from leaves and raw materials from roots. These two pathways are constructed as independently organized conducting tubes. One, the xylem moves water and minerals obtained from soil. The other, phloem, transports products of photosynthesis from the leaves where they are synthesized to other parts of the plant. What are the different parts of xylem? So we have to basically give the different parts of the xylem. We have to provide the different parts, or we have to name down the different parts of xylem. So we have to mention basically the xylem fiber, xylem trachea, xylem vessels, and xylem parenchyma. So we have to mention all those parts. So what are the different parts of xylem? So it will be vessels, tracheids, xylem parenchyma, and xylem fibers. Next, what does the term transpiration mean? So transpiration basically refers to the loss of water in the form of water vapor from the aerial parts of the plant. So we have to simply mention this statement. Apart from that, we do not need to go into much detail, because these are, you can say, one marker questions. So just try to be precise and to the point. Don't need to write like extravagant answers in this. Next, what are the advantages of transpiration? So two advantages of transpiration we have mentioned. First, they help in the absorption and upward movement of water. So water actually moves in an upward direction due to transpiration, and this is what we refer to as transpiration pull. It helps in the upward movement of water. right? And second advantage of transpiration is that it helps in temperature regulation. So these are the two advantages of transpiration. Next, what is translocation? Again, a very direct question. The transport of soluble products of photosynthesis from its place of synthesis. We can add this also, from its place of synthesis to other parts of the plant, right? This process is known as translocation. So the transport of soluble products of photosynthesis from its place of synthesis to other parts of the plant is called translocation. Last part, how does plant remove their waste product? So plants, obviously, they do not have a well-designed excretory system like us. So basically, they store their waste in certain old leaves, or they store their waste in the form of resins and gums, right? So plants remove their waste product in the form of fallen leaves, resins, and gums. Okay. One more example of a case study based question. So again, let's have a look at the paragraph. During a science lab activity, some sugar solution is taken in a test tube and a little amount of substance is taken in the powdered form named as P. So we have a powdered substance, which is P, and it is immersed, or it is taken and put in a sugar solution. The test tube is allowed to stay for some time while the top is covered. When the top is removed from the cork, a characteristic smell is observed. So after some time, we observe a characteristic smell, and we observe the evolution of a gas that takes place, which is named as Z, right? So a gas is evolved, and we have named that gas as Z. The gas evolved can extinguish a burning matchstick, right? So let's again read the paragraph and try to understand if we have collected all the information necessary to answer this question. So during a science lab activity, some sugar solution is taken in a test tube and a little amount of substance is taken in powdered form named as P. The test tube is allowed to stay still for some time while the top is covered. When the top is removed from the cork, a characteristic smell is observed and a gas Z evolution also takes place. The gas evolved can extinguish a burning matchstick. We know that carbon dioxide is used or can be used to extinguish fire. So this gas evolved is carbon dioxide. This we can gauge from this information. And this looks like the process of fermentation, right? This looks like the process of fermentation. Here, sugar solution is basically glucose, which is our substrate, right? And yeast acts on this glucose, and ethanol is produced, alcohol is produced, along with the liberation of carbon dioxide, right? So this is how this entire paragraph is framing to be. Let's have a quick look at the question. Name the powdered substance P. So obviously the substance which is going to act on the substrate or which is going to act on the sugar solution is yeast. So let's have a look at the options. The options are yeast, fungi, algae, and none of the above. So we know that this is the fermentation process and it will take place in the presence of yeast. So the answer will be A, yeast. Next, name the substance whose smell is observed. So we already decoded that this is a fermentation process which is taking place, and as a result of which ethanol production will take place, and that smell that will be observed will be of ethanol. So the correct answer is going to be B, ethanol. Let's still have a look at the options. So ammonia, ethanol, ethane, none of the above. So the correct answer will be ethanol. Next, name the gas Z. So we already decided that carbon dioxide is liberated as a process of fermentation, and the correct answer to this will be A, carbon dioxide. So our options are carbon dioxide, hydrogen gas, ammonium gas, none of the above. So the correct answer to this is carbon dioxide gas. Next, what is the process of conversion practiced in the above activity? Fermentation is the process. Okay, so fermentation is being practiced in the above activity. So our answer will be B, fermentation. And what type of respiration is observed in the above activity? So fermentation is an anaerobic respiration. It takes place in the absence of oxygen, right? It takes place in the absence of oxygen. So the correct option will be B, anaerobic respiration, right? So the important things to note in this chapter, if we do a quick recap of the important things that we have to remember. Firstly, diagrams, human respiratory system, and structure of alveoli, nutrition in amoeba, the structure of human heart, human excretory system, structure of nephron, right? The and human alimentary canal or human digestive system, right? So these are important things that we need to remember. There are two separate paragraphs about blood pressure. They are given in a box format, and dialysis, that has to be covered along with the diagram and theory for dialysis, right? Apart from that, if we break down these topics into the subtopics that can be, questions can be asked, then human digestive system, basically all the digestive enzymes and their functions, right? The different parts of nephron and their functions, right? The entire stepwise process of urine formation in the transportation part, what is single circulation, what is double circulation, along with the diagram of double circulation, Remembering that is important, right? The different types of nutrition, whether it is autotrophic or heterotrophic. Heterotrophic maybe whether it is parasitic, whether it is saprophytic, right? Whether it is holozoic. So you should be well aware of that, and the type of organisms that show the different types of basically the different types of nutrition that they are showing. In the human respiratory system, we need to remember the function of the parts of the upper respiratory system, the functions of the parts of the lower respiratory system, and transportation in plants. So basically, the entire functioning of xylem and phloem in detail, we have to be aware with all the things. So this is like an entire covers almost everything that is given in the chapter, right? Almost everything in types of respiration, aerobic and anaerobic, right? What will be the end products, okay, in each of the type of respiration. So everything needs to be covered, okay? So what all topics we covered in today's class? In this lecture, we covered autotrophic nutrition, nutrition in amoeba, respiration, human heart and circulation, digestion, excretion in plants and animals. So, and I gave you a brief about what all topics that, you know, as a whole, we need to cover in this chapter. Right, so that is all for today's class. Thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you all in the next session. Bye bye and take care.